At 2:14 in the morning, a text message ended 23 years of marriage in 12 words. It wasn't from a stranger. It wasn't a scam. It was from my husband. I left with your best friend. We're not coming back. A photo was attached. The two of them stood barefoot on a beach in Cancun, champagne glasses lifted toward the camera like they'd just won something. My husband was smiling wider than I'd seen him smile in years. My best friend was leaning into him, wearing the necklace I gave her for her 45th birthday. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I typed back 2 words. Good luck. Then I canceled every card, changed every lock, and went to bed. The next morning, the first people who knocked on my door weren't my husband or the woman I used to call my best friend. They were the police. Welcome back to Wounds and Wonder. I'm Megan, 45 years old, and this is the story of the night my marriage ended over a text message, and the morning 23 years of quiet planning caught up with the 2 people who thought they'd gotten away clean. If you've ever had someone mistake your calm for weakness, stay with me to the end. And before we get into it, hit like, share this with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe if you're new here. I'd love to know in the comments, has anyone ever underestimated how far you'd go to protect yourself? Tell me your story below. Now, back to that Tuesday night. My name is Megan Carter. Until that message came through, I believed I understood exactly what my life looked like. I worked as a senior accountant for a regional logistics company outside Columbus, Ohio. My days were spreadsheets, quarterly reports, and helping small business owners untangle financial messes that felt like the end of the world to them. Numbers rarely lied. People did. I'd apparently forgotten that lesson inside my own house. Our brick colonial sat at the end of a quiet cul-de-sac lined with maple trees that turned brilliant orange every October. Kids rode bikes in the evenings. Neighbors waved while walking their dogs. It wasn't a wealthy street, but it was steady, and every mortgage payment had been made on time, because I'd always insisted on handling our finances carefully. The house was legally mine. Most people didn't know that. When Ryan and I married 23 years earlier, my grandmother had helped me buy the property 6 months before the wedding. Ryan moved in after we married. We renovated it together. We built a life inside it together. But on paper, the deed never changed hands. Neither did the investment accounts my father left me after he passed. Those details had never mattered before. Now they mattered more than anything. Ryan Carter was 48, charming when he wanted to be, funny enough to win over a room, and persuasive enough to convince anyone that every setback was temporary. He ran a small construction company that had done well for years, until projects started drying up. Whenever money got tight, I covered the gap. I told myself that was what marriage meant, you carried each other. At least, that's what I believed. Our marriage hadn't always felt complicated. For the first decade, it felt like the easiest thing I'd ever done. Ryan built decks and additions for half the neighborhood, and people genuinely liked working with him. I handled the parts he didn't have patience for: invoices, tax filings, the quiet math of keeping a household afloat. We took a 2-week trip to Portugal for our 10th anniversary. We tried, unsuccessfully, for children, and grieved that loss together in the particular silence only 2 people who have been through it understand. By the time we hit our 20th anniversary, I'd stopped noticing the small ways he'd started leaning on me financially, because leaning on each other was supposed to be the whole point. Jessica Hunt had been my closest friend since college. We'd survived terrible apartments, impossible professors, breakups, weddings, miscarriages, promotions, funerals, and every ordinary Tuesday in between. She knew every secret I'd ever handed another human being. When Ryan forgot our anniversary, Jessica was the one who reminded him. When I was drowning at work, she showed up with dinner. When my mother died, she slept in my guest room for nearly a week. She didn't just feel like family. She felt safer than family, which is exactly why that photograph from Cancun hurt more than I thought anything could. I stared at the picture for almost a full minute after I hit send on my reply, not because I hoped it wasn't real, because I noticed details. The resort bracelet on Ryan's wrist, the sunglasses on Jessica's face that cost more than our first car payment, the champagne. None of it had been paid for with money either of them actually had. I knew exactly what sat in Ryan's business account. I knew exactly which cards they carried. and I knew which of those cards were tied to my accounts. That realization landed like cold water down my back. I opened my banking app. 3 supplementary cards sat under my primary account. Mine, Ryan's, and an emergency card I'd forgotten still existed. One Jessica had used years earlier after her wallet was stolen on a trip overseas. She'd returned it, and I never removed her authorization because she never used it again. Or so I thought. I opened the transaction history. A resort in Cancun, a private yacht charter, a designer boutique, a spa, charge after charge after charge, all within the last 2 days. My pulse didn't race. It slowed down. And that scared me more than panic would have, because when I go calm like that, I make permanent decisions. I called the card company first. A cheerful voice picked up on the second ring. "I need every supplementary card on this account canceled tonight," I said. "May I ask why?" "Because the authorized users no longer have my authorization." It took her less than 5 minutes. Next came the online banking passwords, the security questions, 2-factor authentication, wire transfer permissions. I changed all of it. Then I looked up a 24-hour locksmith. The dispatcher sounded surprised. "You want every lock changed tonight? All of them?" "All of them." An hour later, a gray pickup pulled into my driveway. The locksmith looked to be around 60, tired eyes, rough hands. He glanced at the house, then at me. "Everything okay, ma'am?" "No," I said honestly, "but it will be." He didn't ask another question. He just got his toolbox from the truck bed and got to work, quiet and methodical, the kind of quiet that told me he'd done this exact job for other people at exact hours like this one more times than either of us wanted to count. For almost 2 hours, the sound of drills echoed through my sleeping neighborhood. The front door, the garage entry, the back patio, the basement. Every old lock went into a bucket by his truck. Every new key landed in my palm. When he finished, he held out 3 spare copies. "Want extras?" "No." "You sure?" "I don't think I'll be trusting many people after tonight." He nodded the way people do when they've seen too many marriages end on their doorstep. After he left, I walked through the house. Nothing looked different. The photos were still on the walls. Ryan's reading chair still sat by the fireplace. Jessica's favorite coffee mug was still in my cabinet because she'd practically lived here every football season. And yet the house felt different, lighter, like it finally belonged to the name that had always been on the paperwork. I slept nearly 6 hours straight. I expected nightmares. Exhaustion won instead. At exactly 7:80 the next morning, someone pounded on my front door. Not a knock, 3 heavy blows, then another. I pulled on my robe and walked toward it, half convinced Ryan had discovered his cards were dead and come home either furious or begging. Maybe both. I looked through the peephole. 2 uniformed officers stood on my porch. Neither looked angry. Both looked serious. I opened the door, leaving the chain latched. "Can I help you?" The older one removed his hat. "Good morning, ma'am. Are you Megan Carter?" "Yes." He glanced at his partner before continuing. "We received a complaint from your husband this morning. We need to ask you a few questions." I unhooked the chain and let them in. "I'm Officer Grant," the older one said, shaking my hand. "This is Officer Alvarez." I led them into the living room, where morning light spilled across the hardwood floors Ryan and I had refinished together 15 years earlier. For one flash of a second, I remembered him laughing after he spilled wood stain across his jeans. The memory left as fast as it arrived. Officer Grant stayed on his feet. "Your husband contacted us early this morning. He says you've locked him out of the marital home, frozen his access to the family finances, and taken control of jointly owned assets without his knowledge." "I see," I said. Officer Alvarez studied my face. "You don't seem surprised." "I'm not." "He also says he tried to buy plane tickets home this morning, and every card was declined, and that you emptied the accounts." "I didn't empty anything." "But you did cancel the cards." "Yes." "Can you explain why?" Instead of answering right away, I walked into my home office. I've always believed important conversations deserve documents, not emotion. Inside a gray filing cabinet sat folders labeled alphabetically: home, insurance, retirement, property, banking. I brought 3 of them to the dining table. The officers exchanged a glance. "I figured you'd have questions," I said. Officer Grant opened the first folder, the property deed. His eyebrows lifted slightly. "This house is in your name." "Correct." "Purchased 6 months before the marriage." "Correct. My husband was never added to the title." He described this to us as our house. "It was our home," I said carefully. "Legally, those aren't always the same thing." The second folder held the investment and retirement accounts, all of them predating the marriage, all of them still solely mine. "So these belong to you as well," Officer Alvarez said. "They're not joint accounts, no." "And the credit cards?" "Attached to my accounts. He was an authorized user." "So canceling them was within your rights." "I believe it was," Officer Grant said, closing the folder. Neither of them spoke for a moment. Outside, a stroller wheels squeaked past on the sidewalk. Somewhere down the block, a lawnmower started up, ordinary Wednesday morning sounds, while 23 years of marriage got reduced to paperwork in my dining room. "Mrs. Carter," Officer Grant finally said, "may I ask what actually happened?" I picked up my phone, opened the message from 8 hours earlier, and slid it across the table. Neither of them said anything while they read it. The photo lingered on the screen far longer than it needed to. Officer Grant read it twice, the way people do when they're hoping a second look might soften it. "They sent you this at 2 in the morning?" Officer Alvarez asked, almost embarrassed for me. "He left that part out, I take it." "He did," Officer Grant admitted. "Did he ever threaten you?" Alvarez asked. "Was he ever violent?" "No to both." "Then why change every lock instead of just telling him not to come home?" I looked toward the door. "Because he already told me he wasn't coming home." Officer Grant nodded slowly. "Fair point." Then, gently, "He also claims you drained the accounts." "I transferred nothing that belonged to him. I only removed access." "Would you mind showing us?" I logged into my banking app on the table between us. Balances, transactions, authorized users, everything was still there untouched. I scrolled back through the Cancún charges. Hotel, restaurants, boutique, spa, yacht. Every charge on the supplementary cards starting Monday afternoon before Ryan had even sent his message, as if he assumed I'd never look. Then something else caught my eye. A wire transfer. $8,000. Unknown recipient. Dated 3 weeks earlier. "That's strange," I said. "What is it?" "I don't remember authorizing this." I clicked again. Another transfer, 6,000. Then another 4,500. Different dates, different amounts, all approved electronically, all pulled from accounts with my name on them. A cold weight settled in my chest. "I've never seen these," I said quietly. "You didn't make them." "No." My accounting instincts took over. Ignore the emotion. Follow the numbers. I filtered by electronic transfers and the screen filled with dozens of entries buried among routine reimbursements. I opened the recipient details, different banks, different names. The total climbed with every entry. 10,000, 20, 32. Nearly $40,000 gone, not overnight, but stretched across almost a year. My breathing stayed steady. Years of spreadsheets had trained me for exactly this. Panic later, evidence first. "Officer," I said, "I think my husband has been stealing from me." Neither of them interrupted as I kept opening records. Construction materials, consulting fees, and several with no explanation at all. "You should call your bank immediately," Officer Grant said, "and probably a lawyer." "I know one." "For what it's worth," he added, closing his notebook, "this looks like a lot more than a marital dispute." "I agree." "There's no criminal issue with the locks or the cards," Officer Alvarez said. "If he tries to force his way in or threatens you in any way, call us immediately." "I will." After they left, I locked the door again. Not out of fear, out of habit. Then I sat down at my desk and pulled every financial record from the previous year. By noon, my dining table had disappeared under stacks of statements, tax documents, and wire confirmations. The deeper I dug, the worse it got. This wasn't an impulsive affair. It had been planned, funded, and carefully hidden. I had balanced other people's books professionally for years while someone quietly rewrote mine. I called Diane Foster, the best financial litigation attorney I knew. She picked up on the second ring. "Megan, you sound different." "I need a lawyer." A pause, then her voice went all business. "What happened?" I looked at the newest unauthorized transfer glowing on my screen. "My husband left with my best friend, and I think he's been committing fraud." Silence, then 6 words that changed everything. "Don't touch another single document." Diane arrived just after 3 that afternoon, carrying nothing but a leather briefcase and a legal pad. She didn't waste time on sympathy, which is exactly why I'd called her instead of anyone else. She set the briefcase down on the table, now buried in statements and yellow sticky tabs. "You've already done half my job," she said, scanning the piles. "I've spent 20 years finding accounting errors. Today, let's find something more useful: the truth." She asked me once early on whether I wanted coffee or something stronger. I told her coffee. This wasn't a night for anything that would slow me down. For the next 3 hours, we barely spoke. We worked. She reviewed every strange transfer while I traced each payment back through my own bookkeeping software. Every time something looked off, she flagged it in yellow. Soon the table looked like a field of sticky notes. "Look at this," she finally said, sliding 3 statements toward me. At first, they seemed unrelated. One payment to a downtown luxury apartment complex. One wired to a car dealership. One labeled only consulting services. "What do they have in common?" I asked. She turned the pages around. "The receiving bank." I stared for a few seconds before I saw it. Every payment ended at the same 4 account digits. "So they're all feeding one account," I said. "I think your husband opened one he never wanted you to see." We requested the full transaction history from my bank, and while we waited, Diane asked, "Tell me about Jessica." The name felt like it belonged to someone I'd never actually known. "We met in college," I said. "She's been my closest friend for over 20 years." "Did she ever have money problems?" "Not until about a year ago. She lost her marketing job. I remember her crying over coffee, worried she'd lose her condo." "So that's when Ryan started helping her." "I assumed he was just being kind." "Or," Diane said, "they were already planning this." I wanted to reject it outright. Instead, another memory surfaced: Jessica suddenly driving a newer SUV. New handbags she joked she'd found on sale. Weekend trips she couldn't afford on an unemployed marketer's budget. I'd believed every explanation because I trusted the person giving it. That trust, I realized, had been my blind spot the whole time. My phone buzzed. The bank had emailed the expanded records. Diane leaned over my shoulder as I opened the file. Every transfer, every destination, every authorization code. And something neither of us expected. "Megan," she said quietly, "look at the IP addresses." The electronic signatures on file were mine, but every single approval had come from Ryan's office. Not our home, his office. She closed the laptop slowly. This just became much more serious. "You think he forged my authorization?" "I think he made it look like you approved transfers you never even saw." I looked toward the family photos still sitting on the bookshelf. One from our 20th anniversary, another with Jessica laughing between us. People who looked like they'd trust each other forever. Appearances, it turned out, could survive long after the truth underneath them was gone. "There's more," Diane said, opening another document. "This downtown apartment, the lease isn't under Ryan's name." "Jessica," I said. She nodded. "The lease belongs to a Vanessa Jessica Hunt. So I've been paying her rent." "It appears that way." We kept following the money: furniture, insurance, utility deposits, even grocery deliveries. Piece by piece, a second life emerged from the paperwork, not a spontaneous affair. A carefully financed escape built entirely with my money. Near 7 that evening, a security alert hit my email. Someone had tried to log into my cloud storage from Cancun. The attempt failed because I'd already changed every password the night before. "They're looking for something," Diane said. Then I remembered my digital signature, scanned years earlier at Ryan's suggestion, so business paperwork would be easier whenever I traveled. It was saved on an old external hard drive in my desk drawer. Diane plugged it in without a word. Folders appeared: taxes, insurance, photos, estate planning. Then one labeled business, which I'd never opened. Inside were dozens of PDFs, contracts, loan applications, vendor agreements, many carrying what looked exactly like my signature, on documents I had never once seen. Diane read in silence for several minutes. "Megan," she said finally, "this isn't just unauthorized spending anymore. I believe your husband used your signature on financial documents without your knowledge." The room went very quiet. Outside, rain had started tapping against the kitchen window. I closed my eyes for one steady breath before facing whatever came next. When I opened them, Diane was already sorting the evidence into separate folders: fraud, unauthorized transfers, false authorizations, possible forged signatures. "Starting now," she said, "you do not answer his calls. You don't answer hers either. If either of them shows up here, you call the police." "I won't answer, and I will call. And if they apologize?" I surprised myself by smiling. "They're welcome to apologize, through their attorneys." She smiled for the first time all day. "Good." Before she left, she stopped at the door. "One piece of advice. People who think they got away with everything almost always make one final mistake." "What kind of mistake?" "They come back." She was right within 48 hours. It was an unusually warm Saturday afternoon. I was trimming the rose bushes by the front walk when a taxi slowed in front of the house. I recognized Ryan before he even got out. The confidence from the beach photo was gone. His shirt wrinkled, his beard grown in unevenly, the expensive sunglasses nowhere in sight. Jessica climbed out behind him, dragging 2 oversized suitcases and a designer bag I'd unknowingly paid for. Even from 30 feet away, I could feel the tension between them. They weren't speaking to each other. So much for paradise. I set the pruning shears on the porch rail and went inside before either of them reached the steps. 3 knocks landed on the door. "Megan," Ryan called, "I know you're home." I opened it, chain still latched. He forced a smile. "There you are." "What do you need?" His smile disappeared. "My cards aren't working." "I know. We've been trying to reach you." "I know. You changed the locks." "Yes." Jessica stepped forward. "You've made your point." I looked at her for the first time since Cancun. "No, Jessica, I haven't. We just want to come in and talk. You told me you were never coming back." Ryan sighed. "We said a lot of things. You texted exactly 12 words. Can we not do this outside?" "No." Across the street, a neighbor glanced over while checking her mailbox. "The hotel froze our reservation," Ryan said, lowering his voice. "Our cards don't work. We've been living out of suitcases for 2 days." "I know." "Stop saying you know." "I know because I canceled the cards." Jessica's arms crossed. "You had no right." "I had every right." She laughed, sharp and humorless. "Everything Ryan has belongs to both of you." "Actually," I tilted my head, "the bank disagrees." Ryan's jaw tightened. "We're married." "We are." "So half of everything is mine." "Then your attorney shouldn't have any trouble proving that." Silence. Jessica finally broke it. "We just need enough to get back on our feet." I almost laughed. "My retirement savings weren't meant to fund your honeymoon." "It wasn't a honeymoon." "I understand exactly what you told me." I reached into the entryway cabinet and slid a manila envelope through the narrow gap in the door. Ryan opened it. His face lost color fast. "Petition for dissolution of marriage. Temporary financial injunction. Motion to preserve assets." "You already filed." "I did." "You didn't even talk to me." "You announced the end of our marriage from a beach." Jessica peered over his shoulder. What does that mean? It means she's freezing everything, Ryan said. Every account connected to me, I confirmed. Your business accounts stay open since they're legally registered to your company alone. You knew all this. I know a great deal more now than I did 3 days ago. Panic flickered across his face. What does that mean? It means my attorney has been very busy. Who's your attorney? Jessica asked. Diane Foster. Ryan stepped toward the door. You hired a lawyer. I hired the right one. His breathing changed, not anger anymore. Fear. This wasn't an emotional argument. It was becoming a legal case, and he knew it. Jessica grabbed his arm. Let's just get our things. I nodded toward the garage. They're already packed. They both turned. Neatly stacked boxes sat under the covered driveway. Every shirt, every kitchen gadget they'd bought together. Nothing damaged, nothing thrown out, just packed with the same care I used to wrap Christmas presents. You packed all this? Jessica asked. I had time. Ryan walked slowly toward the boxes, picking one up labeled office, another winter clothes, a third family photos. He opened it. Every frame was wrapped in newspaper. He looked back at me. You left the pictures. They belong to your memories, too. Guilt flickered on his face and vanished almost as fast. Megan, he said, softer now, we made a mistake. I said nothing. We can fix this. No. I never meant to hurt you. You didn't plan on getting caught. His shoulders dropped. I'll end it, he said, with Jessica. Jessica's head snapped toward him. What? He didn't look at her. I'll come home. The words hung there, not convincing, just late. Far too late. You didn't leave because you were confused, I said. You left because you believed I'd always still be here. Before he could answer, 2 patrol cars turned onto the street, lights flashing silently. Jessica stiffened. Ryan, I know, she muttered. Officer Grant stepped out of the first cruiser, Officer Alvarez behind him. Both recognized me instantly. Good afternoon, Mrs. Carter. Grant nodded toward Ryan. Mr. Carter. I wasn't causing trouble, Ryan said. We got a report that someone was attempting to enter a residence after being told not to. I wasn't forcing my way in. But you were asked to leave. You called them, Ryan asked me. Yes. Officer Alvarez glanced at the stacked boxes. Looks like the belongings were already prepared. We're still married, Ryan said. And this property is titled solely in Mrs. Carter's name, Grant replied. How do you know that? We've already reviewed the documentation. His face went pale. Jessica looked back and forth between us. This is unbelievable. No, I said quietly. This is paperwork. Officer Grant waited while Ryan loaded the last box into the taxi and shut the trunk. Before he got in, he turned back one final time. This isn't over. I met his eyes without raising my voice. I know. Next time, bring your attorney. The taxi pulled away and didn't come back around the block. I stood on the porch until it disappeared, then took a slow breath. Everything okay? Officer Grant asked before heading back to his cruiser. For the first time in days. I have a feeling we'll be seeing each other again. So do I. He tipped his hat slightly and got back into the cruiser. I watched both patrol cars pull away, then went back inside and made myself a cup of tea, hands steadier than they had any right to be. That evening, my phone buzzed with an email from Diane. Subject line, they've officially responded. Court date scheduled. 4 weeks out. In 1 month, everything Ryan had tried to bury would become part of the public record. The courthouse looked exactly the way I remembered from years earlier, when I'd testified in a routine business dispute for my company. Metal detectors, hushed conversations, people pretending they weren't nervous. This time, I wasn't there reviewing someone else's mistakes. I was there because my husband had spent almost a year stealing from me while playing the victim to anyone who'd listen. I hadn't slept much the night before, though I hadn't expected to. I'd laid out my clothes the way I used to before big presentations at work, back when the stakes felt like nothing compared to this. Deanne met me outside the courtroom with 2 color-coded trial binders. "You look calm," she said. "I am." "Don't volunteer information. Answer only what's asked. Let the documents do the talking." Inside, Ryan sat beside his attorney, wearing a navy suit I'd bought him for our 20th anniversary. Jessica sat 1 row behind, avoiding my eyes, dark circles under hers. Whatever fantasy they'd built together had clearly come apart long before today. His attorney, Todd Reeves, greeted Diane with a polite handshake. "Morning. I hear you've built quite a case." "I've simply organized the truth," Diane said. The bailiff called the room to order. Judge Carol Simmons entered, silver-haired, early 60s, with an expression that discouraged unnecessary speeches. We stood, then sat. Reeves spoke first. "Your Honor, this case is fundamentally about a marriage that ended badly. My client made poor personal choices, but Mrs. Carter responded by financially destroying him, freezing assets, denying access to marital resources, acting out of revenge rather than necessity." He said it smoothly. If I hadn't lived through the last month, I might have believed him. Judge Simmons turned to Diane. "Miss Foster." Diane stood. "This case isn't about a broken marriage, Your Honor. It's about financial deception." She opened the binder. "My client did not remove assets from Mr. Carter. She protected assets that legally belonged to her after discovering they had been used without her knowledge." She projected the first exhibit, the Cancún photo, then Ryan's text message. No one spoke. Then the credit card statements, hotel charges, restaurants, luxury shopping, all connected to my account. She read the dates and amounts without any theatrics. The silence in the room grew heavier with every line. Then came the wire transfers, one after another, apartment lease payments, vehicle deposits, insurance premiums. Jessica lowered her head. "These transfers originated from accounts solely owned by Mrs. Carter," Diane said, displaying the authorization logs. "The approvals bear Mrs. Carter's electronic signature." Another click. "Every authorization came from an IP address registered to Mr. Carter's office, not her home, his office." Judge Simmons leaned forward. "Mr. Reeves." "My client acknowledges making the transfers," Reeves said carefully. "With permission," Diane asked. Reeves hesitated. "We maintain there was implied marital consent." Diane walked to the evidence table. "I'd like to call Mr. Carter." Ryan took the stand, composed at first. "Did your wife know about the apartment leased under Jessica Hunt's name?" "No." "Did she authorize you to pay that lease?" "No." "Did she know you used her account to do it?" "No." "Were you having a relationship with Ms. Hunt at the time?" He swallowed. "Yes." "And you used your wife's money to support that relationship?" A pause. "Yes." A quiet murmur moved through the gallery. "Did your wife ever authorize these transfers in writing?" "No." "Verbally?" "No." "Did you tell the bank she had approved them?" He looked at his attorney. Judge Simmons answered for him. "You'll answer the question." "Yes." "No further questions," Diane said. Reeves stood, looking far less certain than he had an hour earlier. "No questions." Jessica was called next. She walked to the stand without looking at me. "Miss Hunt," Diane said, not unkindly, "did you know where the money was coming from?" Jessica's fingers tightened on the armrest. "At first, Ryan said we shared everything. And later, I found out it was Megan's." "When?" She closed her eyes briefly. "About 3 months before Cancún." "Yet you kept accepting the payments." "Yes." Ryan turned sharply toward her. "You said we weren't talking about that." "Mr. Carter, you'll remain silent," Judge Simmons said. "I asked him several times if he was going to tell Megan," Jessica went on. "He kept saying there'd be plenty left that she'd never notice." For the first time all morning, Ryan looked genuinely frightened. Diane displayed one final exhibit, the recovered folder of business documents. "A forensic document examiner reviewed these files," she said, handing over the report. The electronic signature was copied from a previously authorized tax document and reused without Mrs. Carter's knowledge. Judge Simmons read in silence for several minutes. No one spoke, only paper turning. "Mr. Carter," she finally said, and he stood slowly. "This court was initially asked to resolve a marital property dispute. What I now see is evidence suggesting possible financial fraud and unauthorized use of another person's identity." The room went still. "The civil issues before this court are straightforward," she continued. "The residence remains the sole property of Mrs. Carter. The disputed accounts belong to Mrs. Carter. The unauthorized transfers appear undisputed." She signed several pages. "This court orders immediate reimbursement of recoverable marital funds, affirms the temporary financial injunction, and grants Mrs. Carter exclusive possession of the residence pending final dissolution." Ryan's shoulders dropped. She wasn't finished. "This court is also referring these additional findings to the appropriate investigative authorities." Reeves closed his eyes. He knew exactly what that meant. Behind me, I heard someone in the gallery exhale, and I realized it was my sister Sarah, who'd insisted on sitting through every session even though I'd told her she didn't have to. Todd Reeves gathered his papers without looking at his client. Somewhere near the back, a court clerk kept typing, unbothered, as if the end of my marriage were simply another line item in a very long day. Under the table, Diane squeezed my arm, not in celebration, in reassurance. As the hearing ended, Ryan finally looked at me. I'd imagined that moment for weeks. I expected anger, maybe regret. Instead, all I saw was confusion, as if he genuinely couldn't understand how it had all come apart so completely. The answer had never been complicated. It wasn't Cancún. It wasn't Jessica. It was the moment he convinced himself the truth would stay buried forever. "The hardest part is over," Diane said outside the courtroom. "No," I said quietly, looking back through the doors at him still seated beside his attorney. "For him, it's only beginning." 3 months later, the house felt quieter than it ever had. Not empty, quiet. There's a difference. Empty was what I felt those first few days, still half expecting to hear his keys hit the bowl by the door or her laugh drifting in from the kitchen like she still belonged there. Quiet came later, after the shock wore off and the rooms stopped waiting for people who no longer deserved to walk through them. By early summer, I'd changed more than the locks. New curtains in the bedroom. The oversized recliner Ryan used to claim as his throne, donated. Every photograph that made me feel foolish for trusting what had been standing right beside me, taken down. Slowly, new ones went up, my sister and me at Lake Michigan, wind-blown and laughing. A watercolor from a local art fair. My mother holding me when I was 5. Nothing dramatic. Just proof that my life had existed before Ryan Carter and would keep existing after him. The divorce finalized on a Tuesday afternoon in a small conference room that smelled like coffee and printer toner. Ryan sat across from me, thinner than I remembered, his suit hanging differently on his shoulders. Jessica wasn't there. She'd left him not long after the fraud referral became real. According to Diane, she was cooperating with investigators to protect herself. I didn't ask for details. Some things you stop wanting to know because the knowing won't buy you any peace. The final agreement was simple. The house stayed mine. My retirement account stayed mine. Ryan was ordered to repay a significant portion of what he'd taken through the sale of business assets and court-monitored payments. His construction company, already unstable, collapsed under the weight of unpaid vendors and the investigation. A few of his old crew reached out to me afterward, almost apologetically, to say they'd suspected something was off for months but never imagined it involved me. I thanked them and didn't ask for more than that. I'd stopped needing other people to confirm what I already knew. There were nights that first month when the quiet in the house felt less like peace and more like waiting for a phone call that never came. I won't pretend every evening was easy. Grief doesn't disappear just because the person causing it deserved to lose everything. I grieved the version of my marriage I thought I'd had. Even while I was grateful I no longer had to live inside the real one. I didn't smile when Diane explained the terms. I didn't celebrate when the judge signed the decree. I just breathed. For 23 years, I'd believed marriage meant carrying the heavy things together. What I hadn't understood was that Ryan had slowly handed me every burden and called it partnership. After the papers were signed, he followed me into the hallway. "Megan." I stopped but didn't turn right away. Diane stayed beside me. "Can I speak to my wife alone?" he asked her. "Ex-wife," Diane corrected. The word landed clean. Ex-wife, not wife, not partner, not the woman waiting at home while he built a second life on her money. I finally faced him. "You can speak here." His mouth tightened, then he nodded. "I know you hate me." "I don't." That surprised him. Maybe it surprised me too. Hate requires a kind of closeness I didn't feel anymore. "I ruined everything," he said, looking at his hands. "Yes. I was stupid." "No," I said. "Stupid is forgetting an anniversary. Stupid is buying the wrong paint color. What you did was deliberate." He flinched. For a moment, the man in front of me looked less like a villain and more like someone who'd finally reached the end of his own excuses. "I don't know how I became that person," he said. I believed him, not because he was innocent, but because some people destroy their lives one small justification at a time and only recognize themselves once the wreckage is too big to hide. "I hope you figure it out," I said. "Do you think you'll ever forgive me?" I thought about the message at 2:14 in the morning, the necklace, the wire transfers, the forged signature, the police on my porch, the courtroom. Then I thought about the quiet house waiting for me, sunlight falling through curtains I'd chosen myself. "I already stopped letting you live in my head," I said. "That's all I have to offer." His eyes went red. I didn't stay to watch him cry. Outside, the afternoon was warm and bright. Diane walked me to my car without a word. Before I opened the door, she handed me the signed decree. "You're free," she said. I looked at the papers, then the courthouse steps, then the sky. "No," I said softly, "I'm safe." That summer I learned how extraordinary ordinary things can feel when no one is quietly taking pieces of you. I bought peaches at the farmer's market without checking for another unexplained withdrawal. I slept through the night without waking to review bank alerts. I had my sister Sarah over for dinner and cooked salmon the way Ryan always claimed to hate. We ate it on the patio with cheap wine and bare feet propped on the empty chair. "You seem different," Sarah said. "I am better." I watched a robin hop along the fence, more honest. That was the truest answer I had. Sarah stayed late that night, and we talked the way we used to before life got complicated, about nothing important at all, which was exactly the point. I started volunteering with a weekend financial literacy program for women rebuilding after divorce. One Saturday, a woman about my age stayed after class with a folder pressed to her chest. "My husband handles everything," she whispered. I knew that whisper. I knew the shame folded inside it. I pulled up a chair and sat with her for almost an hour. We didn't fix her whole life that day, but we opened her first bank statement together. Sometimes freedom starts with a single password only you know. In late summer, an envelope from the court confirmed Ryan's first repayment had gone through. It was smaller than what he owed, but it was real. I deposited it into a new account labeled Garden Fund. By early fall, the backyard had transformed, raised beds, lavender tomatoes, a stone path leading to a wooden bench under the maple tree. When the carpenter asked what I wanted carved into the back of it, I thought about it for days, then chose 5 words. She chose herself and stayed. The first time I sat on that bench alone, I cried. Not painfully, just enough to honor the woman who answered a cruel message with 2 calm words, and then saved her own life one decision at a time. I started going out there most evenings after that, coffee in hand, just to sit with how far the year had come without asking me to fall apart to get there. One evening, as the air cooled and the first leaves started turning, my phone buzzed on the patio table. Unknown number. I almost ignored it. Then I opened it. It was Ryan. "Can we talk?" No apology. No explanation. Just another door he expected me to open because I'd opened so many before. I sat with it for a long moment. I remembered being 22 and believing love meant never giving up. Then I thought about being 45, understanding something far more important. Love without respect becomes a debt you pay forever. I deleted the message. Then I blocked the number. The sky over my backyard had softened into deep blue. Wind moved through the maple leaves. My house glowed behind me, warm and steady. Every lock changed, every room reclaimed. Ryan thought he was leaving me with nothing. He never understood that what he took with him was the life I no longer wanted, and what he left behind was mine, my home, my money, my peace, and my name. If this story touched something in you, maybe because you've been betrayed, used, or made to feel guilty for protecting yourself, I want you to remember this. Starting over isn't failure. Sometimes it's the first honest thing you've done for yourself in years. So tell me, if you were sitting on that bench with Megan, what would you have carved into it? And do you think she should have let him say more that day in the hallway, or was blocking that number the right ending? Drop your thoughts in the comments. I read every one of them. If this story reached you, share it with someone who needs it, hit like, and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Come back soon. We've got a lot more stories about strength, dignity, and second chances still to tell, and I'd be honored to have you here for the next one.